Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Before we begin, let me ask you something that might sting a little. Have you ever felt someone still watching you from a distance? Not with hatred, not with indifference, but with the kind of quiet, unspoken longing that almost feels like a ghost brushing against your skin. The kind of energy that tells you they still feel you, but they can't bring themselves to face you. If that hits something inside you, breathe for a moment. You're not imagining it. And before we go deeper into this psychological truth, make sure you subscribe and like the video, because what I'm about to reveal is something most people never hear explained honestly. I want you to picture something. A person who once opened up to you, maybe slowly, maybe awkwardly, maybe in a way they didn't even understand themselves. Someone who let you see a side of them that they hide from almost everyone. Now imagine that same person pulling away. Not because the feelings are gone, but because the feelings became too real, too vulnerable, too dangerous for the world they built around their own emotional defenses. And instead of leaning in, they retreat. You feel the distance, you sense the coldness. But underneath that surface withdrawal is a heart that hasn't healed, hasn't moved on, and hasn't let go of you the way they pretend to. When you feel someone avoiding you without a clear reason, the mind creates stories. They don't care. They're done. They forgot me. But human psychology doesn't operate in clean emotional lines. People avoid what overwhelms them. They avoid what exposes their insecurities. They avoid what makes them feel out of control. And deep feelings, real, raw, unfiltered feelings, create exactly that kind of internal chaos. Most people aren't taught how to process it. So instead of speaking up, they shut down. Instead of reaching for you, they hide from the intensity of wanting you. You might not know this, but emotional avoidance is one of the strongest indicators that someone is still tied to you. If you meant nothing, they wouldn't feel tense around you, protective of themselves, careful with their words, or strangely alert when your name comes up. Indifference is quiet, but avoidance is loud. It's the subconscious screaming, I'm not over this, but I don't know how to handle it. Stay with me, because once you understand why someone avoids the very person they care about, you'll see the truth hidden beneath their distance, and it's far more emotional than you think. There's something you need to understand right away. When someone still has deep feelings for you but begins to avoid you, they're not running from you. They're running from the version of themselves that surfaces whenever you're near. Think about that for a moment. Some people desperately want connection, but the moment they feel something powerful, their old wounds, fears, and insecurities rise like a tide they can't control, and you become the mirror reflecting everything they've buried about themselves. The longing, the fear of loss, the hope, the vulnerability. Being around you activates emotions they haven't learned how to manage. So the easiest option becomes emotional escape. The human brain is wired for self-protection, even when it means sabotaging something it wants. When someone avoids you while still feeling deeply for you, they're often battling conflicting instincts. Their heart wants closeness, their mind fears exposure, and their defenses demand distance. You become the emotional trigger they can't predict. They worry they'll say too much. They worry they'll read too much into your facial expressions. They worry they'll break in front of you, or worse, fall even deeper. And falling deeper scares people who don't trust themselves, who fear rejection, or who feel unworthy of love. So instead of approaching you, they retreat into a shell they think is safer. One of the clearest signs someone still has strong feelings is when their behavior becomes inconsistent. They'll be warm one moment, cold the next, responsive for a day, silent for a week. They watch your stories but ignore your messages. They linger near you but avoid direct interaction. That's not indifference, it's emotional conflict. It's someone trying to keep their heart from bleeding through their words. Someone trying to release pressure from feelings they've tried unsuccessfully to bury. Psychology shows that avoidance is often a protective mechanism rooted in fear of abandonment or rejection. If they get close again, they risk losing you again. And for them, that fear is heavier than the desire to connect. That's why you see them keeping their distance, yet still orbiting your world. They don't want to disappear, but they can't bring themselves to step forward either. It's a silent tug of war between desire and fear. And here's the heartbreaking part. They think avoiding you will help them control the feelings. They think distance will numb the emotional pull. But deep emotions don't fade just because someone tries to outrun them. They only get louder in the quiet. There's a psychological truth most people never hear. When someone avoids you despite still caring, it's because you represent a part of their emotional history they haven't fully processed. You're tied to a moment, a memory, or a version of themselves they weren't prepared to face. And the human mind doesn't just respond to people, it responds to the meaning attached to them. You might symbolize failure, hope, regret, desire, or the possibility of something real, and that alone can overwhelm someone who isn't emotionally grounded. So instead of facing those inner storms, they distance themselves, hoping the feelings will settle. But deep emotions don't settle. They resurface at the smallest trigger. Pay attention to the subtle signs. They avoid eye contact, not because they don't want to look at you, but because looking at you makes their chest tighten. They hesitate to speak, not because they don't have words, but because the words they actually want to say feel too revealing. They keep conversations short, not because they're uninterested, but because every extra second risks exposing the affection they're fighting to suppress. Their silence is not empty, it's crowded. Crowded with what they wish they could express, but don't know how to handle. When someone still has deep feelings, their body betrays them. You'll notice the tension in their shoulders, the shift in their breathing, the nervous energy in their hands. Their avoidance is not calm, it's anxious, reactive, and heavy. They're hyper-aware of your presence in a way they can't control. Even if they pretend to brush past you, their mind doesn't, their chest doesn't, their emotional memory doesn't. The heart remembers what the mind tries to forget. And here's something most people overlook. When someone avoids you out of deep emotion, they watch you more closely from afar. Not in a possessive way, but in a quiet, restrained, almost protective way. They listen for updates about you. They notice small changes. They care about things they no longer have the right to care about. That's not closure. That's emotional attachment disguised as distance. They're afraid of messing things up again, afraid of being hurt, afraid that reaching out will expose how much they still feel. So they choose the safer option, silence. But silence doesn't erase emotions, it amplifies them. There's something else you need to understand, and it may hit harder than everything you've heard so far. People don't avoid what they don't care about. They avoid what they don't trust themselves to handle. And when someone still has deep feelings for you, they're not avoiding you because they dislike you. They're avoiding the intensity of their own emotional response. You trigger something in them that feels bigger than logic, bigger than control, bigger than whatever story they've been telling themselves about moving on. And that loss of emotional control terrifies them more than losing you ever did. Think about how humans react to intense emotions. Most people were never taught to sit with fear, love, longing, or heartbreak. They were taught to hide it, quiet it, bury it. So when you walk into a room, or even when your name appears on their phone, their internal alarm system turns on. Not because you're a threat, but because vulnerability has always been their threat. You represent an emotional truth they don't know how to manage, and instead of confronting it, they retreat into silence, hoping the feeling will fade. But the truth is, emotional avoidance strengthens attachment. What they suppress grows heavier. You'll see it in their contradictions. They may act distant, but their reactions betray them. They flinch slightly when someone mentions you. Their mood shifts when they see you unexpectedly. They try to remain composed, but you can feel the tension in the air, the kind of tension that only exists when two hearts aren't done with one another. They avoid conversation, yet their attention gravitates toward you. They pretend they're unaffected, but psychologically, avoidance is one of the strongest indicators that someone is emotionally activated by you. And here's the deeper psychological layer. When someone avoids you because they still care, they're often trying to protect themselves from disappointment. Maybe things ended badly, maybe things ended quietly, maybe things never truly began. But inside them is this quiet, unresolved ache that whispers, "What if I get hurt again?" That fear of emotional repetition makes them hold back, even when their heart is pulling them forward. You are both the comfort they miss and the risk they fear. This is why you'll notice them acting differently around you than around everyone else. They're not cold, they're overwhelmed, they're not done, they're conflicted, they're not detached, they're trying to keep their heart from exposing itself again. Here's a truth that most people never admit. The person avoiding you while still feeling deeply is living in a constant inner conflict. Their mind says stay away, protect yourself, while their heart screams, I still want them. That tension isn't easy to hide. It leaks into small behaviors that feel almost invisible, but once you recognize them, they're undeniable. The late replies, the half smiles when you cross paths, the way they remember little details about you but never mention them directly. Every avoidance is an emotional breadcrumb showing that they are still tied to you, even if they've convinced themselves otherwise. Avoidance is also a subconscious test. Deep down, they want to see if you notice, if you reach out, if you care enough to cross the invisible line they've drawn. They are checking, quietly, almost secretly, if their feelings will be met with understanding or rejection. They're terrified of vulnerability, but they're also terrified of losing you entirely. That's why avoidance is paradoxical. It pushes you away while pulling you closer at the same time. This isn't manipulation in a cruel sense. It's human psychology struggling with raw emotion. And here's another layer. Their avoidance is often tied to fear of judgment, shame, or guilt. Maybe they feel they should have moved on. Maybe they're ashamed of the intensity of what they still feel. Maybe they blame themselves for letting it linger. Their avoidance isn't about you. It's about them trying to navigate the storm inside their own mind. But you, the person they can't forget, become the mirror reflecting both desire and fear. That reflection can feel confusing, even maddening. One moment, you sense warmth. The next, cold detachment. That is the unmistakable signature of unresolved emotional attachment. Here's what's important. Someone who truly doesn't care won't leave this trail. They won't feel the tension. They won't hesitate. They won't orbit your life from a distance. Indifference is empty. Avoidance is heavy. And that heaviness is proof. Proof that despite all the silence and withdrawal, they are not over you. Understanding this is powerful because it shifts the way you interpret their behavior. It allows you to stop spinning stories of rejection and start seeing patterns rooted in human psychology. Patterns that reveal deep feelings they are too scared to express. Recognizing this is the first step toward clarity, both for them and for you. Now let's bring this full circle. When someone avoids you, yet still has deep feelings, it's not about punishment, it's not about playing games, it's about survival. They are surviving their own emotions while still carrying a connection to you that they can't ignore. And here's the truth most people never tell you. This kind of avoidance is often a silent declaration of attachment. They might not say it, they might not act openly, but every pause, every careful word, every guarded glance is a signal that they are still emotionally tethered to you. You have to understand the psychology behind this. When a person avoids someone they still care for, it often comes from a combination of fear, self-protection, and emotional overwhelm. They know that engaging fully might reopen old wounds or expose vulnerabilities they're not ready to face. And yet, their mind can't completely let go. They find themselves thinking about you, replaying past interactions, analyzing everything you've ever said or done. Their avoidance is a struggle, a tug-of-war between the desire to connect and the instinct to protect themselves from potential pain. What's fascinating, and sometimes frustrating, is that avoidance can also be a form of indirect emotional communication. They can't tell you outright how they feel, but every subtle action, every hesitation, every partial engagement communicates. I still care, but I'm scared. They are trapped between the longing to reach out and the terror of being hurt or rejected. That's why their behavior feels inconsistent, confusing, or even contradictory. But it's not random. It's deliberate, even if subconscious. Here's the key insight. Recognizing avoidance as a sign of lingering emotion can change how you approach the situation. It allows you to see the difference between someone who truly doesn't care and someone who is silently wrestling with feelings they can't express. It allows you to stop interpreting distance as indifference and start seeing it as emotional complexity, a hidden signal of attachment, fear, and unresolved longing. So the next time you sense someone pulling away yet still lingering in your orbit, remember this. Their avoidance is not the end of their feelings. It's the echo of emotions they can't yet face. And understanding this gives you a perspective most people never have, the ability to see beyond silence, beyond distance, and into the hidden truth of the heart. This is the rare insight about human psychology that changes how you read people, understand relationships, and even navigate your own emotions. You now know what most men never realize. Avoidance does not equal lack of care. It often proves just the opposite.